The Adventures of Superman, Episode Superman on Earth. The year July 1981. The place Krypton, a lonely planet that orbits a super red giant sun, a sun on its last legs, a sun that might go at any moment. The Kryptonians were an advanced race of men and women that resemble humans down to almost every aspect, except for the centuries of genetic modifications and the high technology that they possess. A technology unlike any other seen, crystalline, yet bizarre. It was a sight to behold, but this was the result of millions, probably billions of years of evolution and development. Well, in the great domed city of Kryptonopolis, a group of criminals, three namely General Zod, Ursa, and Non, were being held prisoner. They were on trial, surrounded by a force field. Around the room where they were being tried at were very ancient faces, like projections on the wall, watching them, monochrome image. In front of them was a young man walking around wearing all black, except for the one speck of color that was on him, a white shield that looks like an S, the symbol of the crest of L. A very prominent family, a family that's ruling the planet. Well, Jor-El was reading the list of crimes of each of these criminals, and after he read the final charge of Non, he says to the projections on the wall, "Now, members of the council, I ask you to pronounce judgment on these criminals." Well, each face spoke, "Guilty, guilty, guilty." And the final face, "Guilty." Well, Zod, a big built man with white hair, but he does not, even though he's middle-aged, he does not look like a typical middle-aged man, says, "Jor-El, you hold the final judgment for us. You've been known to disagree with the council once in a while. I ask, spare us. Do not send us to the Phantom Zone," said Zod. Jor-El, who's standing there, looking at them sternly, holding a crystalline scepter, raises the scepter in the sky, and the tip of the scepter glows white. He walks off. After he leaves the room, a sound of thunder shakes the whole room. As the room's vibration was getting intense, it was evident that the dome was opening, as they were starting to see the stars. Surely enough, the dome completely opens, revealing the expanse of the Kryptonian night sky. Out of the night sky comes a crystalline pane of glass, completely flat, two-dimensional, propelled by an unknown force, coming towards the open chamber. Jor-El was long gone. Zod was screaming, "One day, Jor-El, you and your heirs will bow before me." Soon the crystalline pane came and swooped the three criminals up. Now they were inside the pane, struggling and screaming and pressing against the glass as it wandered into the night sky, eventually into space. The dome closed. After the trial, Jor-El was once again with the council. Most of the people on the council were probably old men. Even though they were old, the centuries of genetic engineering, they really didn't show their true age. Jor-El was probably in his early 20s. He was a gifted scientist and the head of the council. He says, "Ladies and gentlemen, the last couple earthquakes is evident that our sun will go supernova." One of the councilmen says, "I doubt this, Jor-El." Another scientist, Arlel, says that this planet is just merely shifting its orbit, and that's what's causing these quakes. Her evidence supports this more than what your evidence is supporting. What's not to say that the sun will not last another million years? I'm sorry, Jarrell, we're not going to buy this," said the councilman. Jarrell gave that look of defeat. Said, "So be it. If I cannot convince you all, then I have no choice. Just but to resign and just admit defeat." One of the other council members said, "Jarrell, we know you. You're young, you're optimistic. I warn you. We warn you," he corrected himself. "You start panic in the city, you will be sent to the very dimension you created." Jarrell says, "You have my word," to the one councilman and the rest of the council. "I'm just going to head back home and I'm just going to, work on other research. If the council need me, you know where to find me." Jarrell walks off. One of the other council members says, "You think he's going to start spreading panic?" "He won't," said the other councilman. "He won't at all. He knows better." Well, in his own palatial home, far off from the city, Jarrell arrives. His wife Laurel was saying, "Husband, did they take your threat seriously?" "No," he said. "No. They don't believe me. They think the other scientists' evidence is more proving than my evidence. Unfortunately, I don't have that much to back up my theories, even though I know I'm right," he says. So Jarrell says, "We'll just go with Plan B." He walks up to a crystalline console. He touches one of the crystalline tubes of the console, and a holographic image displays like a control panel. He starts touching the buttons on the holographic imagery, shifting them around, working some sort of code or something, and then presses the final button. Everything turns green and the images disappear. "I sent it," he said. "At least the ones who believe me are now forewarned to take matters in their own hands with their own planning. I got one more plan," he says, "and now it's my plan B." He walks over into his laboratory, where there in his laboratory was a giant crystalline ship. It was very small, but shaped like a star. Laura, nervous, said, "Are you sure you're doing the right thing?" she asked her husband. Jarrell says, "I know I'm doing the right thing. Listen, if we're going to die, at least let our son have a chance at life. Thankfully, I was able to invoke the old laws and still take the embryo and put it in this experimental ship that I designed. Just by the design alone and the right amount of fuel and my calculations, he should arrive to Earth in exactly 9 months, just in time to be born on the planet." He goes to the other crystalline console, presses another tube, and sure enough, a holographic image appears of what looks like farmers working in wheat fields and underneath blue skies and white clouds. Laura was shocked. She's like, "Look at that man, like a savage, showing off his bare chest, no shirt on, nothing." Jarrell says to his wife, calming her down, "It's the only choice. They're the only race that resembles us. Anatomically, we're the same, except for a few minor differences. Genetically, he'll be able to live among them peacefully. He'll fool them, except for the one problem," said Jarrell, as he looked at the pod. "The centuries of genetic engineering gave us unique abilities on other planets. The yellow sun, the radiation from that yellow sun of that planet they call Earth, will give him great powers and abilities beyond normal men on that planet. He'll be a god among them. That is my fear, that if he takes that power without the guidance, he might think it is his right to conquer them." He says, "That's why I instilled this." Suddenly, a hum comes from one of the crystalline consoles, and a green crystal slides up a tube. He grabs the green crystal. He says, "This stone," to his wife, "represents the penultimate of our technology. In here in this stone will contain the essences of me and you and the rest of the Kryptonian Council and the whole science teams, everybody, philosophers, artists, all our knowledge is also in here. And the ability to build a new home is in here. At least, even though me and you will be dead, we still can have contact with them. We can still teach him right from wrong and how to control his powers and what to do with them. Jor-El walks over to the star-shaped pod and inserts the crystal into the pod. The crystal goes right into the pod and disappears. Jor-El walks over to the crystalline console again, another one, and activates a series of holographic controls and starts fueling the pod. I just hope we're not too late, he says. I hope we're not too late. Well, hours had passed, and the pod was completely filled with energy to fuel its journey. Well, his fueling of the pod didn't go unnoticed. The security systems and Kryptonopolis picked up the unauthorized usage of fuel. One of the council members said, "You don't think he's, building something, a ship to get away?" The other council member said, "He knows better. I have trust in Jor-El. He's the best scientist we have, and he knows when to follow orders." Well, suddenly, after Jor-El was making a few touches, there was a violent earthquake forming. The earthquake got more and more violent. Laura screamed, "Jor-El, what's going on?" Jor-El says, "It's too late. It's too late. Damn it, it's too late. It's Krypton. We're all gonna die." And he was right. The entire city began shaking, and his palace was shaking violently, falling apart. Jor-El quickly ran over to the other console and hit a few switches. The pod began glowing like a bright white star and began to lift off slowly. As it was lifting off, it flew and crashed through the crystalline dome of his palace and took off. The two looked at that pod carrying the embryo of their developing child to its new destination, Earth. Jor-El and Laura gave one final embrace and a passionate kiss as the earthquake was peaking in intensity. The ground was cracking open. The people were screaming and panicking and falling into the crevices that were forming. And finally, as the pod cleared the orbit and it was going into deep space, there was a big explosion as their star blew up, destroying Krypton and a violent supernova. The pod was going very fast. Inside the pod was the developing embryo of the unborn Kal-El. As it was developing, the pod flew across space past the crystalline pane where Zod and his two minions were at. They were screaming for the pod to pick them up. As soon as it cleared the former Kryptonian system, it made the jump into warp speed and took off. In its 9-month journey in hyperspace, it was traveling to 6,000 light years between Earth and Krypton. The embryo was developing. There was a voice, a recording of Jor-El playing, talking to the developing child, as the child was going through all the phases of fetal development inside the pod and the safety of its artificial womb as it flew across space. Finally, 9 months later, April 13th, 1982, the pod arrives at its destination, Earth. Its final destination, Kansas, the small town of Smallville. It was a boring Sunday for a young farming couple, Jonathan and Martha Kent. There were two young couples in their mid-30s. They tried for years to have children, and they failed. But today was going to be a special day. Destiny would grant them their one desire to have a child in a very different way. Jonathan was driving his old beat-up pickup truck, and his wife said, "I wish everything was not closed on Sunday here." Jonathan's like, "Well, it happens. It's a small town. We're almost home anyways." Suddenly Martha said, "What in the world is that noise?" It's It's a loud ringing. I must be getting a cold or something. Jonathan says, I don't think you're getting a cold. I hear that ringing too. Sounds like an airplane coming in very low. Jonathan stops the the truck, and sticks his head out the window. He looks out and he sees what looks like a falling star coming dangerously close to them. He screams, Martha, look out! Get out of the truck quickly! The two quickly run out the truck as the shooting star crashes right near their truck into a neighboring field. It formed a giant ditch of burnt wheat and charred soil. Jonathan and Martha ran to the crash site. They saw the ruins of the crystalline pod. Jonathan was like, what in the world is that? Martha was like, could it be Russian? One of those space pods or something? I don't know, he says. I don't know at all. And suddenly, the pod starts making a creaking and cracking noise and hissing. The pod cracks in the center and opens up. There was gas escaping. Then, so they saw the pod open up. They heard the crying of a baby. They were like, what in the world is that? The pod top half came off completely, and there it was, what looked like a newborn baby, covered in placenta and everything. Jonathan quickly took off his sweater, took the baby, and heck, even the baby had a cut umbilical cord. Jonathan wrapped the baby up. Martha said, oh, dear God in heaven, those Russians, those evil commie bastards, sending children up in space. Jonathan looks, is like, that's nothing like I've seen designed on Earth before. I don't think this is man-made, he said. Martha says, don't be nonsense. We don't know what these people are up to. This could be some brand new technology. Come on, we got to take the baby, she said. Jonathan's like, now, wait a minute, Martha. We're not going to take this baby. This is an unknown baby. How do we know that whoever sent this child up in space, it's not going to come looking for it later on? Well, they're not going to come looking for it, said Martha. We're going to take this child, we're going to raise it as our own, and then later on tonight you come out here and you take that thing and make sure no evidence of this thing exists. Jonathan said, great. Well, they took the baby, sure enough, and they raised him, named him Clark Kent, after Martha's maiden name, Clark. And the years passed. Spring turned to summer, summer turned to autumn, autumn turned to winter, as the cycle of life repeated itself. Young Clark Kent was growing up fast as the years were going by. He was starting to exhibit some power as a child, namely, he had a lot of strength for a little child, a lot of strength, and he can run really fast, but more of his powers will manifest as he gets older. We look at a little incident in 1994 when 12-year-old Clark Kent comes home. As the door slammed shut, Martha was getting dinner ready. She screamed at Clark, Clark, how many times did I tell you, don't slam the door? I'm sorry, Mom, Clark said. I'm not feeling well. Martha was shocked. It's like, Clark, you not feeling well? You never had a cold a day in your life, not even the sniffles. What do you mean you're not feeling well? Clark sits down on the kitchen counter and says, Mom, something's wrong with me. I was playing baseball today in PE. Well, we lost the baseball, and I had to go looking for it since I was the one that batted the home run. Well, as I looked around, I couldn't find it, but then all of a sudden, I saw the baseball, but it was not it's not where it was at. It was where it was behind. It was behind a big rock, and I saw through that rock like it was not there, like it was an X-ray, and I saw the baseball. I grabbed the baseball, then I freaked out as I began to see everybody's insides. I have some sort of X-ray ability, Mom. I saw everybody's insides. I freaked out and I kept it to myself. Lana noticed something was wrong with me right away, but I lied to her. I hate lying to Lana. I really like her, said Clark. He said I had to. I just said I went home. I said I had to. I was sick and I left school early. I've been walking around and trying to control these abilities that just manifested itself all of a sudden. Martha said, "Oh dear son, you had me worried. I thought you were really getting sick." "Oh, I think the time has come," she said, "to have the talk." Clark confused, like, "You mean the birds and the bees, Mom? I already learned that in biology class in school." "Oh, no, no, so not that kind of talk," she said. "We already had that talk. We're talking about the talk, about who you really are, what you really, I mean, I want to say this. You are adopted. We don't know who your parents are. We don't even know where you came from. You were born, we could say, it's safe to say you were born in Kansas, but when your father gets home, we'll explain everything." Well, they revealed Clark's identity of being an alien or something or superhuman for years until recently. Jonathan and Martha thought Clark was just some Soviet experiment. Well, the years went by. Then came Clark's 18th birthday, April 13th of 2000. Everybody was having a big. They were having a big party at the Kent house. All of Clark's friends were invited, including his love interest, Lana. Well, by the time he was 18, the majority of Clark's powers and ability had manifested itself. He could shoot out some sort of heat vision out of his eyes. He had a powerful breath that he could blow like a hurricane wind, even freeze things with his breath. His hearing was so powerful that he could hear anything from miles away, even hear a pin drop in the with the like hear a pin drop when there's a lot of noise around. It was and finally the last thing to manifest itself was his ability to fly. He didn't know what he was. He didn't think he was a Soviet experiment. Now he thought he was some sort of space alien. His dad at the time eventually revealed the alien pod that carried him to Earth in the basement in the farm. Well, Clark left his own party and went out to the field to look at the starry night skies. Lana ran after him. She's like, "Clark, what's going on?" Clark says, "Lana, I just found out, not too long ago that I was adopted. I'm just wondering who my parents are. Look at this. I'm legally an adult now. I mean, Mom and Dad, the ones who raised me, have been the best parents a boy could have. But I just wonder about my real parents and what was their motive to give me up." Lana said compassionately, "Who knows, Clark? Maybe they couldn't afford to raise you. Maybe something happened. Maybe you were in danger. Who knows? I'm sure in due time you'll find out, Clark. I'm sure." So Clark says, "Lana, I have something to say. I kind of like you a lot. I mean, I liked you since I was starting to notice you were really attractive, like around 11 or 12, he said. Lana says, "Say no more, Clark. I feel the same way." And the two started sharing an impassioned kiss. But things were going to change for Clark even more. After the party was over, he had spent the remainder of the party with Lana out in the field. Well, it was night. As the late night had come in, Clark and the rest of the family went to bed. It was around the pre-dawn hours. The sun was just starting to shine a little bit, but not rise, but you could see the twilight of dawn coming. Clark heard a weird noise coming from the barn. He wakes up, looks around. He goes into his parents' bedroom. They were sound asleep. They did not hear this noise. Clark wondered if it was something he could hear with his special hearing abilities. Clark wandered into the barn and went into the basement. He uncovered the alien pod, and there was a green glowing light emanating from the chamber. Clark looked into the pod, and he saw a green crystal. He goes in, reaches for the crystal, and pulls it out. As he held the crystal in his hand, he felt something strange coming over him, as if the crystal was feeding him information. He felt the crystal was telling him, go north, go north. You'll find your destiny. Well, Jonathan and Martha can't get up and do their early morning farming routines. Martha screams for Clark. Clark, come on, sleepyhead's time. I know you partied last night, but those chores are not going to get done. Your dad needs help. Martha is like, Clark, come on. She uncovers the bird cage. She's like, good morning, Smiley, she says to their canary. She screams, come on, Clark. Your dad's waiting. Well, Martha goes to the kitchen and sees Clark out in the field staring at the morning sky as the sun was rising. Well, she walks out. She says, Jonathan, come on, I found Clark. He's just out in the field looking at the sky. The two of them walk up to Clark, who was looking at the twilight morning skies as the sun was slowly rising to a new day. Jonathan says, Clark, son, what's going on? Clark shows him the green crystal that was glowing on and off like a pulsating light. Martha's like, what is that? It was in the pod, Mom. It called me not too long ago. And now I have to leave, he says. Martha started to get teary-eyed. She's like, I knew this day was going to happen. Jonathan said, we knew this day, both of us knew this day was going to happen. Whatever brought you to Earth was going to call you away. I'm starting to figure out, we figured out long ago, you were not some Russian space baby. You're an extraterrestrial, part of a race that looks exactly like us, but different from us in the same, in a special kind of way, he said. Well, Clark says, I'll be back. I don't know how long, but I'll be back. It's not permanent, he said. He walks over to his parents and hugged them both as his mother was crying. Well, we look now into the North Pole, namely Ellesmere Island in Canada, and the frozen tundra. Clark was walking through in heavy winter gear in the backpack. The crystal pretty much brought him there. Well, he takes his backpack down, reaches into his backpack, pulls out the green crystal that suddenly, as he was holding it, was like telling him to throw it. Clark throws the green crystal far. Well, the green crystal falls into a heavy snowbank. Suddenly, the green crystal begins melting the snow around it and sinks in. Well, the snowbank and the surrounding rock collapse into the ground. There was a violent earthquake. Suddenly, large crystalline spires pop out of the ground. It looked like it was formed out of the ice and snow and rocks. The green crystal was building a structure of some sort. Well, finally, the green crystal builds the Fortress of Solitude. Clark was amazed as he looked around. He walks inside. It was an architecture unlike seen on Earth or anywhere, or even the movies. This was truly alien. He walks around. This place was gargantuan. In the entrance, like a main hall, there were two statues, giant statues, of a woman and a man wearing strange-looking garb, holding up with each of them with one hand holding up a globe of a planet. Well, Clark makes his way into the center chamber, and there was a crystalline console. He looks at the crystalline console, and he saw one of the crystals glowing, as if indicating him to pull it. Well, he pulls out that crystal, and almost as if the crystal was telling him what to do, he puts the crystal in a control receptacle. He puts it into one of the holes of the crystalline receptacles, and suddenly he hears a thundering voice, and he hears something rise behind him. A crystalline pillar rises up, and in the in the pillar, an image appears. It was a man with dark hair, combed, slicked back, wearing a white garb with a black emblem on it, shaped like an S. The thunderous voice that emanated from him said, "My son, you have reached your 18th year, as it is measured both on Earth and Krypton. For that, I have been dead for 18 and a half of those years. I am your true father. I am Jor-El, ruler of Krypton and head of the Kryptonian Council. I'm I I'm going to show you what you are, who you are," he says. Clark's eyes lit up and it's like, "You mean I'm going to find out who I am?" The holographic image says, "Yes. You are from a planet called Krypton." Suddenly, Clark was surrounded by an energy field, and he saw images, and these very images were flooding his head with knowledge. None like any other way, like on Earth. It was like knowledge of who he is and what he is was being downloaded. Well, he revealed the Jor-El's holographic representation revealed to him his Kryptonian legacy, what his powers, what his powers are, and what causes his powers on Earth, and how he should control them and what he should use them for. Well, eventually, Clark leaves after he gets his little lesson on who he is, returns home and discusses to his parents what he is, who he is, his real name, and everything. Well, the years pass. Clark goes to journalism school and becomes a reporter. Well, he returns home in 2006, now 24 years old. He discusses with his mom and his dad about what he wants to do with his life now that he said he was not going to stay in Smallville. He's going to the big city. And he said with the big city, he can have more job opportunities as a reporter. Jonathan asked him, "So what city are you going to, son?" "I'm going to Metropolis," he says. It's a city out in Delaware, right at the bay. It's a big city. It's almost like a clean-cut version of New York City. But I like it. Plus, there's a newspaper out there called the Daily Planet that's hiring right now. I don't know if I'm going to meet the credentials because I only have 2 years of, journalism experience, and I'm not really, per se, I've been a freelance journalist for 2 years, and they're looking for somebody that's, been in a newspaper steady for 2 years. So, Clark said, "Oh, Mom, Dad, I guess now, this is really goodbye for now. At least I don't need an airplane ticket to come and visit you. I can visit you anytime I want." Martha smiled. "Yes, that's one good thing." Well, Clark said, "Before I leave, I'm going to make one more stop to see my other father, see what he has to say." Well, Clark returns to the Fortress of Solitude. Since the discovery of it, and since the days of college, he had been visiting the Fortress of Solitude on and off to learn of who he was and all. The holographic representation of his father has been teaching him a lot of sciences and mathematics that mankind has not even discovered yet. Well, he puts in the crystal and the pillar raises. The holographic image of his father appears. "My son," he says, "yes, you're 24 years old now. The time has come for me to reveal to you something. You must use your powers," he said, "to help the people of Earth. They need guidance. They need something to look up to. I'm going to give you a suit. This suit was worn long ago by our ancestors when we went into battle. This suit will look like something that was made of earth, but the cloth and everything is different." Suddenly, an energy field surrounds Clark, and the clothing he had on began changing. his shoes, his socks, everything had begun changing. After it was over, the energy field stopped, and now Clark was wearing a blue suit with red briefs, a yellow belt with a yellow oval buckle, the same emblem on his chest as in his father's suit, and the green and a yellow and black version of the same emblem behind the long red cape and red boots. He said, "This is going to be your costume. You must learn to make an alter ego out of this and never reveal to even your friends who you are, because your enemies will always try to use your friends to get to you." Clark looked at his suit and was like, "I don't know what I'm going to call myself, Father, but I'll find out." Jor-El's hologram says, "Now, excellent, my son. Now go forth and do goodness. Use your powers. Inspire mankind." Clark looks up to the ceilings of the Fortress of Solitude and flies off. He flies out of an exit in the roof and flies into the Arctic sky as he broke the speed of sound going into space. Well, a day or two later, Clark Kent arrives at Metropolis. The nice, gleaming, clean city of Metropolis. It was a rich city out on the Delaware Bay. It's pretty. It was clean. It was a place there. It was a big city that you could raise your children in with no problem. Well, Clark arrives at the Daily Planet building. The Daily Planet building was a beautiful old Art Deco building with a giant globe with the words Daily Planet spinning around the globe. Clark Kent arrives at the press floor, which was just a big cubicle jungle of reporters in their desk. It was humming. There were TVs in every corner showing different stations, local stations, international news stations like Fox News, CNN, and MSNBC. Well, as he was walking, he was asking to a young kid that was there. He's like, "Hey, excuse me, where's Mr. Perry White's office?" The young kid had dark jet black hair, kind of long in a mullet, and striking blue eyes. He said, "Oh, it's right there, sir. Hey, who are you?" The kid asked. Clark introduces himself. "Hi, I'm Clark Kent. I'm trying to get a job here. There was an opening. I'm a reporter." "Oh, gee, Mr. Kent, I'm glad to meet you. I hope you get the job. My name is Jimmy Olsen," he says. "I'm the photographer. Mr. White's kind of hard to work with, but if you're good enough, he'll treat you good enough. And plus, he may be tough, but he's fair. His office is right there. It's all glass, so you could see him and he could see us." "Well, good luck on your interview," he said, the kid. Clark's like, what a nice kid. Well, he walks over and he bumps into a woman that was speedily walking by. This woman also had dark hair and striking blue eyes, but she was drop dead beautiful, better looking than Lana. He's like, "Oh, sorry." He was beginning to stammer. He was kind of flustered by her. She's like, "Watch where you're going, sir." "Oh, I'm sorry," he said. "I'm terribly sorry." "Hey," she's like, "You're new here." Clark said, "I'm not really new. I'm trying to interview for a job. I was on my way to a job interview." "Oh," she said, "well, good luck. You're going to need it." Just that comment alone kind of worried him. Well, Clark went to the door of the office and knocked on it. Well, Perry White screams, "Come in." Perry walks in. Perry looks at the young man that walks in the door. He squints his eyes a little bit and said, "Oh, I don't know you. Who are you?" Clark introduces himself. "Hi, good morning, Mr. White. My name is Clark Kent. I'm here for the reporter job opening." "Ah, yes, Mr. Kent. Come, sit down, young man. Come, you look like a good, honest young guy." And Clark sits down, puts the briefcase on his lap, opens it up, pulls out a manila file folder with his a portfolio of his work. Well, Mr. White grabs it, looks through it, and he's like, wow, quite the reporter, freelancer, huh? Clark said, yes, I'm looking for a more stable home to work from. And I heard a lot of good things about this newspaper. Clark said, Perry White said, you're right, you heard a lot of good things about this paper, because you know why, kid? I run this paper, and I believe in the First Amendment, freedom of speech, freedom of the press. Well, if I get this wrong, sue me, kid, but you know, we're always busy here. So, according to this, he says as he read through it, you've been a freelance reporter for 3 years now, graduated college not too long ago, and was worked in a newspaper setting since your days as a high school newspaper reporter. Well, he said, unfortunately, Kent, I'm looking for somebody that has worked at least 2 years in an environment like this, in a newspaper environment. I have nothing against freelance reporters, but it would take you a while to learn the ins and outs of a real, gritty newspaper office. The high school and college papers are pale in comparison to what goes on here in the real world, kid. But don't give up. All of a sudden, Jimmy Olsen comes running into the office. Hey, Chief! Suddenly, Perry White gets up, like, God damn it, kid, what I told you, knock on the door and don't call me Chief. I'm sorry, Mr. White, he says, but there's been an accident at the executive airport. A bunch of guys tried to tie down a blimp and it got loose. There's still a man hanging onto it. Right now, the blimp is like 1,000 feet in the air, still climbing, and this guy's hanging on for dear life. Really, he says. Says White. I want you grab your camera and tell Lane to get out there and give me a story quickly. Yes, sir, he said. Clark's like, oh, gee, golly, that's terrible, as he adjusted his glasses. Well, Perry says, you know, kid, that Jimmy Olsen, he's a pain in the ass, but I'm going to mold him into a proper person. If it kills me. As for Lois Lane, she's the best reporter in this on this newspaper. She writes a lot of the hard-hitting stories that gets the Daily Planet famous press attention. Very few can beat her, kid. Very few. Well, Clark was suddenly struck with an idea and was like, Mr. White, if I got out to the executive airport first and got that story, would you give me the job? White let out a loud, boisterous laugh, and it's like, kid, he says, kid, if you get there first, get a story, then, kid, you'll have that job. You'll get the job. But I doubt it, because right now Olsen and Lane have a head start on you. Clark was like, well, I'll get that story, he says. I'll get that story. Well, he's like, it's nice meeting you, Mr. White, he says, as Clark gets up, extends his hand. Both men shake hands. You got guts, kid. You got guts. I kind of hope you succeed. Clark figures this is a good time to put my alter ego to use. He needed to find a place to change into his costume. Meanwhile, Jimmy Olsen and Lois Lane were driving down the street as fast as they could, trying to get to the executive airport. But there was some traffic jam going on. Lois is like, oh, freaking great, man. We're going to miss the story. Gee, Miss Lane, said Olsen, I hope that guy is okay. I hope they find a way to get that blimp down and save that guy. Lois says, Jimmy, I doubt it. Well, Clark looks around and he finds a janitor's closet. He goes into the janitor's closet and changes. He changes into his costume and flies out the window. He flies across the morning sky. As he flies across the morning skies, a lot of people were noticing a strange man in a blue suit and red cape flying in the sky. Some people were like, what the hell? Some people thought they were hallucinating. Well, they were not alone, for Jimmy and Lois saw this strange figure flying across the morning sky fast. Jimmy also was like, Miss Lane, am I hallucinating? Am I seeing a man flying? Lois is like, no, you're not. I'm seeing this man fly, too. What the hell, she said? What's going on? Well, meanwhile, at the Metropolis Executive Airport, the airport was shut down. The area was sealed off as they were trying to figure out how to save that man who was hanging on to dear life on that blimp that was gaining altitude. The guy at the control tower said, "I just don't know how we're going to get this guy down, and he's already up 1,100 feet in the air." Well, sure enough, the man that was up in the air was hanging on for dear life, the palms of his hands sweating, hanging onto the cable. He didn't know how long he had before his hands gave way, before he would slip and fall to his doom. Well, as the men were trying to figure out in the control tower how to save him and trying to figure out ways to get that blimp down, suddenly the radar beeped, beep, beep, beep. When the control tower operators came and looked at it, it's like, "Sir, there's something coming in quick." What I told them, that we already sent the message out. This airport is closed. One of the other men looking at the control tower radar said, tells their manager, "Sir, that's not. I don't think that's an airplane. It's way too small for being an airplane, but it's coming in very fast. Beep, 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 beep," as the radar was showing. Sure enough, they looked out the window to see if they could see what was coming, and they saw it too. A man flying in a blue and red costume. They were puzzled. It's like they were like, "Is that a flying man?" Well, sure enough, this flying man went up to the blimp as the guy's sweaty palms gave way and he fell. But as he fell, this flying man came and grabbed him in midair. The guy looked at this man. He's like, "Who the hell are you?" He's like, "I don't know," says the flying man. He looks, is like, "Who's got you then?" "I'm flying," said the flying man. I really, it's hard to explain," said Clark in his new alter ego. The guy just was like shocked. Well, the flying man put the guy that was the maintenance guy that was hanging on the blimp down behind a hangar. He's like, "Goodbye," said the flying man, and took off flying. The maintenance guy quickly passed out from shock. Soon he was awakened by Clark Kent. He's like, "Hey, excuse me, sir, you were just saved by a flying man in a red and blue costume." The maintenance guy said, "Yeah, I was. He passes out again. Clark says, "Oh, buddy, this is not a time to pass out. Come on, my job is riding on the line. You're gonna get me this job." Well, sure enough, back at the Daily Planet, the man was there, and he was recounting his story. And he said, as he was finishing his story, he's like, "And that's when I made like a schoolgirl and passed out after that flying fella flew off." Well, Clark said, "I saw this flying fella. He's some kind of Superman of sorts. He could do a lot of things." Suddenly, the name stuck with Clark in his head. "Superman," he said in his mind. "Superman, that's going to be the name of my new alter ego, Superman." Well, Lois was not happy. He's like, "I don't get it. We got a head start, and yet you beat us to the executive airport, and there was a traffic jam because they closed off the surrounding area of the executive airport, and yet you managed to get through, get this guy, and get a glimpse of this Superman or flying fellow, whoever he is, and everything, and outscoop me." Well, says Clark, maybe it was my lucky day. He turns to Perry White, and he asks, "Mr. White, did I get the job?" Perry White lets out a big laugh, and he says, "You've been on the payroll for hours, kid." He shows him the morning edition for the newspaper, and it says, the front page says, "Bizarre Superman saves a maintenance guy from 1,100 feet drop." Story by Clark Kent. Clark Kent let a smile. The end. Like and subscribe.